everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley and today I'm going to be tier ranking all of the thriller books that I read last year. In 2021, I read 38 thriller books, which is probably the most thrillers that I've ever read in a year. And hopefully that number just continues to grow because I just really love thrillers. It's my favorite genre. It's the type of books that I find the most fun to read. So I thought it would also be fun to go and look through all the thriller books that I read and tier rank them. I tend to talk about my favorite ones a lot and my least favorite ones a lot, but the ones in the middle kind of get lost in the weeds. So I thought it'd be nice to review all the thriller books that I read last year and put them in different tier ranking categories. So here are the tiers that I'm going to be filling out for all of my thriller books. The top one is all-time favorites. That one's pretty self-explanatory. These are thriller books that I really loved and that have so far made it on my all-time favorites list and will probably be there for all time. Next up is fun times. These are thrillers that were a fun time when I read them, but they're not necessarily going to stay with me forever. It's not like it's the best book I've ever read, but it was definitely a lot of fun when I read it. Next up is Sorry to This Book, and this tier is for the books that I just don't really remember. Sorry to this book, no offense to this book, but I do not know you. Apparently I read them, but I could not really tell you much about them. Next up is Not For Me. These are thriller books that just weren't my taste. I did not enjoy them, but it wasn't necessarily because I thought it was a terrible book. It was just something that rubbed me the wrong way, or that wasn't personally what I was looking for in the book. Maybe my expectations were set too high. It's just not for me, but it may be for you. And then the bottom tier is Immediately No. These are for the thriller books that I read, I saw what I needed to see, and it's an immediate no from me. So let's jump on into the books. They're in absolutely no in particular order. The first one up is Miss March by Virginia Fato, and this one was certainly a fun time to read when I read it, but I don't know if I'd really recommend it. I don't know. I don't want to think too hard about these. I just want to go with what feels right, and I think I'm gonna call that a fun time. I don't know if I love it or I hate it. It was just a weird one. A Flicker in the Dark is also one that was a fun time. This is a small town thriller where this girl's dad was a serial killer. It just came out at the start of 2022, but I read it early in December of 2021. And yeah, I recommend it. It's fine. It's just not like groundbreaking or anything. Finlay Donovan is killing it. This one was not for me. I know so many people loved this one last year, but I don't know. It just wasn't really my style. I kind of like the more comedic thriller stuff on the screen, and I haven't really been able to find a book like that I have fully enjoyed yet. Next up is The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharp, and this one I will say is fun times. It's not necessarily an all-time favorite. This is a YA thriller that is a ton of fun, and it is in my favorites of the year, but it's not one that I see it's not the first thing I think of when someone asks me for a thriller book recommendation. Next up is The Turnout, and this one, I'll just say not for me. I don't know if this is really for anyone. I haven't really heard many people talk about it, but this book felt so disconnected to me. It felt like it was trying to do two very different things, and it didn't work for me. Next up is The Plot, and this one, I'm gonna say fun times. It might be an all-time favorite, but I think I'd have to read it again to know, because I know I didn't love the ending of that one because it got a little predictable. So I feel fine saying fun times there. Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. That one's definitely an all-time favorite. That thriller was so fun. I recommend that one to everyone. I absolutely loved it. Comfort Me with Apples. This one I'm going to say is not for me because I've seen some people give it really positive reviews, but I just didn't really feel anything about it. I understood it. I got the message it was trying to go with, and it just didn't do anything for me. It's a novella. It's really short, so it wasn't an incredible waste of time, but I was just whatever, it's fine. Next up is The Last Thing He Told Me, and this one, in this current moment, is fun times. I think long term, it will be a Sorry to This Book where I will forget everything about it, but because I still read it recently in December, it's just gonna be fun times for me. I listened to the audiobook on a long drive, and I definitely recommend reading it quickly, and the audiobook was also good because not much happens in the story, so you just gotta go through it kind of fast, and then it was fun times. A Slow Fire Burning, this one's gonna be an immediate no for me. I did not enjoy that one. It was really boring, way too long, didn't do anything for me. Infinite by Brian Freeman. This one, I am sorry to this book. I do not really remember much about this. This was the buddy read for the Thrill Till the Weekend readathon, the first round that we did in September, that I was a co-host for with Jacqueline, and this was an alternate dimension thriller that was fun, but I don't know. I really do not remember much about it. I could not tell you many details about what happened in that book at this point. The other Black girl, this one, I think this one's also just fun times. It's really hard for a thriller to make it into my all-time favorite category, so I don't expect that many are gonna be up there. But this one I thought was fun. It was in my favorites of the year. I definitely recommend it a lot, but it isn't like the most exciting, twisty thriller. It is more of like literary suspense slow burn, so it's not an all-time favorite thriller in my brain. Local Woman Missing. This one could fit in several categories for me. I could go ahead and just say immediately no because I really didn't like this one. I could say not for me because a lot of people loved it, but I did not. Or I could say sorry to this book because at this current time, I remember nothing about this book. And honestly, I think that's where it best deserves to reside for me. This one got really hyped up this year. A lot of people were really enjoying it. And so I gave it a try and I read it. Thank goodness I got it from my library on ebook, so I did not pay money to read this book. It just did not work for me. I didn't like it. I wasn't shocked at things. I didn't feel engaged. I didn't like the twists. It hits on things that are particularly not things that I enjoy in thrillers, so that would also be like not for me. But I just remember feeling this way. I cannot remember the events of this book for the life of me. I really remember almost nothing about it, so it's just a sorry to this book. Mirrorland. This one is going to be immediately no. It also hits on things that I specifically don't like in thrillers, so it is kind of not for me, and people might enjoy it, but I just don't really think it's worth reading. It just wasn't really worth my time. I really would not recommend that one. Mother May I by Joshua Jackson, I'm also going to say immediately no. That book started really interesting and it was exciting, and I thought it was going to be this fast-paced, action-packed, fun thriller where this mom loses her baby, but it's like she sees a witch outside her window and then she thinks the witch has taken her baby. So it sounded like it was going to be like slightly, is it paranormal? It really was not like that at all. It just became really boring for most of the book. So that one wouldn't really recommend. Who is Maud Dixon? This one's definitely an all-time favorite. This was my favorite thriller book of last year. I highly recommend that one. Survive the Night. We don't even have to talk about it. That one we're just going to say immediately no and move on. The Hunting Wives. This one I gave like 4 stars when I read this one, and I would say fun times if you would ask me then. But the more I thought about it, it is not for me. I was really rubbed the wrong way by how much of this book is about married adult grown women having affairs with really young boys. I can't remember if they were teenagers or if they were like freshly 18, but they were very young, and the women were like 30s to 40s, and that was a lot of it. It was like a salacious thriller. And while it was exciting to read, that whole time that was bothering me, and I would never want to read that again. So that one just not for me. Next up is The Echo Wife, and this one also I'm gonna say is not for me. I was expecting something completely different with this book, and it just was not what I thought it would be. But once I finished it and read the author's note at the end, I appreciated the book for what it was and what it was doing for the author, but I did not have an enjoyable reading experience. Next up is The Therapist, and surprisingly, I actually do remember this book. I was gonna say it's sorry to this book because I thought I didn't, but I do remember. So I guess I'm gonna say fun times because I had a fun enough time with reading it. It was just like a 3.5 star thriller for me. It was very standard and average, but it was fun enough, and I can still remember the plot twist, which is a sign that I enjoyed it, if I can still remember it. So that one, just fun times. Next up is The Push, which technically is more of like a literary psychological suspense drama with some like lightly thrillery things, but everyone categorizes it as a thriller anyway, so I just put it in this list. And this one is definitely an all-time favorite. I really, really liked this, and this was this author's debut, so I'm super excited to see what they do next. Next up is The Wife Upstairs, which was fun times when I read it, but I remember almost nothing about it, so it's gonna be a sorry to this book. Next up is The Last Flight, and this one is an immediately no for me. I ended up DNFing it after like 60 pages. I just didn't think it was written super well, so that one I did not like. Next up is Every Value Break, and that one lives in my brain as an all-time favorite, but I bet if I read it again, I wouldn't like it as much. I think it was just an exhilarating ride at the time, and I know a lot of people also don't like it, so I feel like it should just be in fun times because I don't see it like standing the test of time with me. If I read it again, I would be like, oh, this isn't as great as I remembered it being that first time. And I don't want to reread it because I had such a good fun experience with it that I just want to let that live in my brain. Next up is 56 Days, and that one I will say is an all-time favorite of mine. I love that thriller. It was so fun. It had everything I like in a thriller. I know so many people don't like it, but I did. It's an all-time favorite for me. Next up is The Wrong Family, and this one is immediately no. It started strong. It had a great little twist in the beginning. I had such high hopes, and then it just went into absolute chaos and was ruined. Next up is The Project, and this one is a sorry to this book. I really don't remember much about the details of it. It's one of those books where if I think about it, I can see certain scenes playing back in my mind, like little pieces of it, but I don't really remember much about it. It was like a 2-star. I didn't really like it. It was just fine. The best thing about it is the cover. The artwork on the cover is so good, but the story, not so good. The Maidens is one of my favorite thrillers of the past year, but I think I'm gonna call it Fun Times. I don't think this one's gonna stand in my brain as an all-time favorite for me for long. I think if I reread it again, it probably wouldn't hold up as well. So that one I'm just gonna call Fun Times. Winter Counts. This one's a sorry to this book. I remember almost nothing about this book. I think I did read it in like January or February of 2021, so it has been a while, but yeah. I remember the basic idea of the book. I remember nothing else about it. I did like it when I read it, and it was like a 3.5 or a 4-star. Like, it was good. It was well written, well constructed, exciting to read, but it's not something that has stayed with me. His and Hers by Alice Feeney. This one, I am honestly struggling to recall this book, and I just read it in December. All I remember is I didn't like it. And I remember the idea of it. Oh, and now I remember the plot twist. Okay, the final plot twist was good, but everything else about the book, I just didn't like. It just wasn't good to me, which is weird because the other Alice Feeney I read this year was amazing. And I know a lot of people do like this one. So I think I'm just gonna say not for me. Next up is In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, and I know so many people love this one, but I think it was just too overhyped for me, and it just ended up being Fun Times. It was okay, it was fine, it was fun, it was a good thriller, but it was not this incredible thing for me like it was for so many other people. Razorblade Tears, that's another one that got really hyped, but it just wasn't really for me. I don't find the revenge story that compelling, I'm finding. Just doesn't leave a lot of room for many surprises for me most of the time, so that one just didn't really work out for me. Bathhouse is one that I would say is an all-time favorite of mine. I really like the runaway train style thriller, and that is exactly what that was, and it was so much fun to read. Next up is For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing, and this one was Fun Times. It was good. It was nice. It was fun, but it wasn't the next best thing, you know? Not a Happy Family. This one was also not for me. It was just more of a mystery than a thriller, and I was bored. Next up is The Sanatorium, and this one, I really liked it when I read it, but I don't really remember anything about it. But that's probably because I listened to this one on an audiobook, and I sometimes have a harder time remembering books if it was an audiobook experience, especially if I didn't have like huge expectations going to the book and didn't pay the absolute most attention because I was super interested to hear everything. So yeah, I don't really remember much. It was good. If you're looking for like a wintry thriller, I would still recommend it, but I would not be able to talk with you about it because I would just have to tell you that I don't remember anything about it. Next up is Behind Her Eyes, and this one I really loved when I read it, but it's not going to be an all-time favorite. It's just going to be Fun Times. The plot twist was cool and it was fun, but the rest of the book's just kind of average anyways, so I would just call that Fun Times. And then Ghosts of Harvard, this final book, I'm gonna say this one was just not for me because I really liked this book until it came to what the author chose to do with the ghosts, and I didn't like the way the ghosts were written, which seems silly and like a small nitpick, but it takes up quite a lot of the book. I just didn't like that style of supernatural brought into the thriller, so not for me. Was really well written, really want to see what else this author does, but that one just ended up being not for me. So here's my final breakdown of all of my thrillers that I read last year. And it's a kind of even mix, but most of them ended up in Fun Times, which is good enough for me. That is my goal with a thriller. I just want to have fun. I just want it to be a fun time. So I'm really glad the majority ended up just being fun for me. There's of course a couple I forgot. There's a couple that I found out were not for me, but then I learned more things about my taste and what kind of books I'm probably not going to enjoy as much. And I only ended up reading 6 duds, which is still kind of a lot, but it could have been a lot worse. Let me know if you have read any of these books and what you think about them, if you would have maybe stack ranked any of them differently. I'm also planning on doing another video like this for all of the horror books that I read last year as well, so you can look out for that. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, you might want to be so you can get the notifications when I post, so you can see the next version that I do of this video with horror books. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!